So this is something that I think it was from the Slack. I'm not sure, but basically this was something that Jesse posted, and I don't know exactly what the provenance was of this, but this is where he's talking about nascent science versus public science, and I think it may have been associated with one of the reading groups that you're involved in, but Holton made a sharp distinction between two phases of the scientific enterprise. So S1 is science in the making or nascent science. And this is what we call the private stage. So this is science or modes of investigation that are messy, subjective, and filled with intuition, aesthetic preferences, and thematic commitments. This is where the z-axis is most active. I guess you mean like there's a three-dimensional space where z-axis is progress, basically, and progress is made in the z-axis. And then S2 is finished science or public science. So this is the public stage as opposed to the private stage. And so once a discovery is made, the z-axis is sanitized away. The resulting paper is written to look like a purely logical deduction from empirical facts, which is the x and y axes. So this is, of course, what a lot of times happens with papers. If you write up a paper, a lot of times people will, especially like a nature paper, a lot of times it'll be presented as if, well, this was something that was pretty elegant in its sort of origin and then execution. So, you say, well, we had this idea, and then we had this hypothesis, and then we tested the hypothesis, and we got this result, and we did a great job. And what you don't see is a lot of the sort of false starts and, kind of irregularities that went into that result. So sometimes, you'll have, if you run an experiment, you might have research assistants collecting data, or you might have people processing the data. And they maybe try different things before they get to the thing that's actually in the paper. So this is a thing that I think a lot of people have talked about in terms of reproducibility. That is, if we aren't transparent about this sort of private stage or S1, then we can't really have a good account of S2. I mean, we can publish the paper and sometimes it's reproducible. I mean, it looks great and it looks very elegant and it boils everything down to exactly what you basically need to know about that project. But you also miss a lot of the detail that may be critical to replicating a result. So if you tried things until it just worked, which is sometimes a lot of times what groups will do. They'll just kind of say, well, we tried things, and then if something worked, we stuck with it. And sometimes that's a mix of intuition and trial and error, and which is great in retrospect because you can say, oh yeah, that obviously worked. But in the moment, it isn't necessarily a smooth path. And so this is so you can think of this 3D space where you have kind of things building up along a z-axis or like, going up in time. And then, you have a lot of false starts. You have a lot of things that you try. You have a lot of alternatives and decisions you have to make. And then you get to this place of maybe the public stage, which is the top of the graph, which is where you have your X and Y axes. And on those axes, you can draw out your results. And then that's what you show to the public, as opposed to everything underneath on the z-axis. So that was interesting. And then the graduate insight. So Holton's legacy is a warning to historians and scientists alike. If you only read the final papers or this S2 phase, you're missing the actual engine of discovery, or the S1 phase. And that I think is really insightful because you have this, you have all of the the innovation underneath this final result. And you can't understand that final result, really understand it unless you revisit the sort of S1 phase. Now, when
Yeah.
people talk about innovation, they're often like they talk about it like kind of as it's a magic phrase. Like, we want to foster innovation. Okay, how do you foster innovation? Do you have people publish a bunch of highly polished papers, or do you give them a space and let them do things for a while, and then when they get ready to produce some polished report, then let them do that, and then that's your result. But of course, the innovation relies on that sort of first part where people are doing the work, and there's no polished paper to mark progress, only kind of updates and things that look quite messy. So and then sometimes people expect the polished result right away, which is a problem for fostering innovation because you simply can't have innovations, or you can't have leaps of discovery without that messy part in place.